Welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Wednesday Connect series. We're very excited to have Stefanie Maio and Scott Turner here to teach us about hiking in San Diego. I'm sure we all know the beauty that surrounds us, and we're very excited to learn more about hiking trails adaptable to all. So very happy to have you both here. In case you are not familiar with the community center or this is your first time joining us, welcome. And I hope that you learn a little bit about the center. We are a nonprofit organization, and we are here in the Windansea area of La Jolla, and we serve adults and seniors every day. We have programs and services. Currently, we are online, and so we are very excited to tell you that we are actually opening our doors on June 15th for in-person classes. So we're very, very excited. It's been a long 15 months, but we are happy to have everyone back in person. Of course, there is some protocol that has to be followed. So please, for any information, please visit our website. It's ljcommunitycenter.org. You'll be able to see all of the classes that we have in person, as well as the protocol that needs to be followed in order to attend those classes. Another great event that we have coming up, it's our summer soiree, and that is going to be on June 25th. It's kind of our grand opening, welcome back. Advanced registration because there's limited capacity, so I really hope that you all consider joining us for that event. And of course, if you're not a member, what are you waiting for? Please consider joining as well. You can find all that information on our website again, which is ljcommunitycenter.org. So again, thanks for joining us, and without further ado, I'm going to introduce both of our speakers. Thank you again, Stefanie and Scott, for being here. Scott Turner is a local hiking guide, author, photographer, and therapist. His works include co-authorship of the 5th edition of San Diego's Hiking Bible, Afoot and Afield, San Diego County. Scott has written 4 additional books covering some of the most beautiful national parks in the American West, including Hike the Parks, Joshua Tree National Park, Hike the Parks, Zion and Bryce Canyon National Park, Hike the Parks, Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks, as well as the soon-to-be-released Day Hiking Yosemite National Park, due out on October 1st of 2021. Now, a little bit about Stefanie. Stefanie Maio is the outings leader trainer for the Sierra Club San Diego chapter. She has been active with the Wilderness Basics course since 2007 as a participant and later chair of the organization that teaches people how to hike, camp, and backpack safely. She is passionate about the outdoors and enjoys inspiring others to explore, enjoy, and protect the planet. Her favorite places to hike usually involve waterfalls and or slot canyons. So again, thanks for joining us, and please help me welcome Scott and Stefanie Maio.
Great. Hey, welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you so much. And you know what? We are so lucky that we live in San Diego. Sorry, Edith, that you're in Canada right now, but you know, during this whole time, we have so many great places to hike that's local to us, and then our deserts and our mountains as well. So today we're just going to go over an overview of hiking in San Diego, talk a little bit about preparation and safety, and then how to go about choosing that hike that's right for you. Scott's going to go over 5 great hikes for getting started. And even if you're a pro, these places are fantastic locations to go hike and explore nature. We're going to talk about some different resources and then open it up for questions and answers. So I'm going to pass it off to Scott to give us a little bit of an overview of hiking in San Diego.
Thanks, Stefanie. So one of the things that makes San Diego County so wonderful is that we've got some of the greatest, well, by greatest, I mean the highest number of different species, both in plants and animals, anywhere in the United States. We're right up there with Riverside County. And what that means is that there are countless different habitats to explore, ranging from the coastal habitats that I'm sure many people are familiar with. We've got mountain habitats that support coniferous forests with fall color, meadows, streams, waterfalls. We've got the interior foothills, which includes chaparral, boulder-studded peaks, oak woodlands, oak groves, things like that. And then, of course, we've got the desert, which supports everything from high altitude pinyon and juniper woodlands, palm groves, open spaces with slot canyons and badlands. So for people who live in an urban area, we have a remarkable amount of natural beauty surrounding us. And of course, Afoot and Afield, the book that I co-authored, gave me a chance to see all of it, well, as much as I could possibly see in 3 years. And that book hammered home the point that we have an enormous amount of opportunities for outdoor exploration within little more than a couple of hours worth of driving.
Right. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about preparation and safety. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the common hazards that you might run into when you're out on the trail, how to really determine that difficulty of the trail, resources, navigation, and knowing your limits. I mean, that the trail's always going to be there. And if you're not feeling great, you know, we always say, turn around, go home, or sit down on a bench for a while till you're feeling better. And then we're going to talk about what to bring. So if we continue, some of the common hazards that you're going to find in San Diego, and the real big one is heat. And I'm just going to give you some tips with regards to heat and how you can kind of beat the heat in San Diego, as I like to say. And then I think Scott's got something to share with us about that. And what I always recommend is really check the weather. I know it's always sunny and 75 in San Diego. That's what everybody says, but it's not the case. There are some days where it's super hot and, or, you know, you've got that marine layer coming in and then all of a sudden it burns off and it's hot out. So I recommend checking the weather. And then also look at the time of day. If it's going to be hot, try to choose your hike to go out early in the morning or later in the afternoon when the temperatures cool off. You know, pick cooler locations to hike. So for example, coastal hikes or going into our local mountains like the Cuyamacas. And then you can also look for trails that have shade, or you can be like this gentleman in the picture who's bringing an umbrella with him and he's created his own shade. And that's an excellent way, you know, just so you can go out on those sunny trails in the hot weather. The other thing I really recommend is wearing loose fitting clothing. And I tend to lean towards light fit colors, just because if you're wearing a black shirt, you know, the sun's just beating down on you. So light, loose fitting clothes, breathable fabrics. You know, we talked about cotton kills when we talk about hiking because, you know, your sweat builds up and you don't get a chance to wick away that moisture. But when it's hot out and it's dry conditions, that's totally fine. But breathable fabrics, you can find them at all the stores. They're fantastic. And then staying hydrated. So what I like to do is I like to drink before I actually go out on the hike. And then I also take water with me. And I know you're going to say, Stefanie, are you crazy? I can't drink a liter of water and then go hiking. I'm going to have to go pee. But guess what? Most of these locations, they have bathrooms, so you'll be fine. And if you're out in the wild, nobody cares if you go behind that bush. All we ask is if you use toilet paper, please bring a baggie with you so you can pack it out. And then your pets. We highly recommend when it's hot outside, don't take your dog hiking with you. Your dogs can't sweat off the heat like we can. They can't talk to you to say, hey, you know what? I'm really hot. I don't want to hike anymore. They're just like, you're the best. You're my owner, and I'm going to do whatever you want, and I'm going to go up this hike with you. So if it's really hot, we say kind of leave the dog at home. And so that's what I want to talk about, beating the heat. Scott, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one of the best strategies for dealing with the weather, even in a place like San Diego County where the weather is fairly predictable, is if you've got an idea of what day you're going to be hiking, check the weather throughout the week. And I'm just going to share a quick experience with you that I had over this past weekend. I had planned a trip up to the Sierra Nevada for a quick camping trip, and I had been checking the weather pretty consistently. Now, in May in San Diego, we're accustomed to just having a lot of low clouds from the May gray. And a lot of people were coming up from San Diego to the Sierra, and they were expecting that it was going to be pretty warm, pretty comfortable. Well, guess what? It dropped 3 inches of snow on top of another couple of inches over 2 days. So we had a whole bunch of snow, and there were a whole bunch of people up there camping who were clearly not prepared for it. So my pro tip for people who are looking to hike and are concerned about weather conditions, whether it's too hot, too cold, too rainy, too dry, whatever your preferences are, check it throughout the week, because weather forecasts tend to change pretty consistently throughout the time as they get a little closer to understanding what's actually going to happen on a given day. That way you don't catch yourself unprepared.
Great tip, Scott. Thank you so much for sharing. One of the other things that we always recommend is to wear a hat. And you'll see that the people in this photo, they're wearing baseball hats. Well, those are okay to shade your face, not exactly the best to protect the sun from the back of your ears or your neck. So a wider brimmed hat is recommended, or you can carry an umbrella like Brian does in this picture. Also applying sunscreen. So what I do is I just make it a practice. We live in San Diego. I just put sunscreen on in the morning just before I'm going out on my hike rather than once I get to the trailhead. And sunglasses, whether it's sunny out or shady, wearing a good pair of sunglasses to help protect your eyes, and lip balm, protecting your lips because it's dry here and they get chapped, and that'll just make you feel a lot better. So one of the next common hazards, and a lot of you have had experience with snakes. And Scott, did you want to share a story about snakes, or did you want me to jump in on this one? What to do? You're muted.
I don't really have a story about snakes. When I do get the opportunity to talk about snakes, I like to dispel a few misconceptions because let's be honest, snakes are rather frightening for a lot of people. Some people have some pretty deep-seated fears with them. And it does prevent a lot of people from actually going out and hiking because they're worried about what might happen when you come across a snake. And so I don't know if this is gonna spook anybody, but I've got a nice little picture of one here. Wait, nope, right there. We also call them danger noodles. Sometimes we call them nope ropes. But the thing about rattlesnakes, they tend to hibernate during the wintertime, so you're a lot less likely, it's not impossible to see them, but you're a lot less likely to see them during the winter. They typically wake up around March and become a little bit cranky. They've been asleep for a little while. They probably have not had a cup of coffee yet, so they can be a little bit cranky. But the thing to know about rattlesnakes is that if you give them their space, they will not bother you. They will not attack you. They will shy away from you. They are not known to attack people unless they are provoked. Now, of course, sometimes if you're hiking in a brushy area and you may not necessarily be able to see the rattlesnake, you want to have some extra caution. But if there's good visibility, like if you're hiking on a wide trail, for example, and you see a snake, all you have to do is just give it some space, work around it, and they will not attack you unless they're cornered. Most of the bites that I'm aware of happen on people's hands because people are trying to mess with them. So it's if you're concerned about snakes, one of the best pieces of advice I can give you is to give them their space and don't approach them. Not that most people here are going to want to go up and give a rattlesnake a hug, but I just like to share that with people.
Yeah, and what I wanted to add about snakes as well is watch where you put your hands or where you're sitting. So try not to put your hands in a crack in between rocks because that's maybe where a snake might be. Or if you're going to sit on a log, check the other side of the log first. You can just tap, if you're using hiking poles, you can just tap along the area. And someone has asked, what do you do if you happen to get bitten by a snake? So the first thing is to stay calm. I know it's super hard to do that. And then call 911 if you're in cell phone service, because it's better to stay put if you can, and if you can get evacuated quickly from emergency services. Now, if you can't get evacuated, it's to walk out of the trail area to meet emergency services and to do that in a calm fashion. You don't want to be running down the mountain or the hill to the cars because you're just basically pumping the venom through your body. However, something to note is 25% of snake bites are dry, so they're not actually shooting out any venom into you. So those are just kind of some tips with regards to a snake bite. And if you do get bitten, something that's helpful is if you happen to have a pen on you, and I know this is not one of our 10 essentials that we carry when we're hiking, but it's to kind of mark the area, draw a circle around it with the time, and then every 15 minutes to kind of make the circle larger as to where the swelling is going and mark the time. And this helps your emergency response team know how quickly the venom is moving through your body. So that's just something that I've learned over the years. Scott, do you have anything to add to that? Yeah. Okay. Now the next thing that I know for me, this is like one of my paranoid things. I'm always like, is that poison oak? Is that poison oak? So we thought we'd show you a picture of poison oak. And basically it's leaves of 3, leave them be. And I know you're gonna be like, oh, I think there's 3 leaves on that plant. Guess what? don't go near that plant. I'm always like, be cautious rather than taking the risk and getting poison oak. And I did go on a hike to Cedar Creek Waterfalls when the old route was still available. And we went through a patch of poison oak, and we were like, yeah, I think that was poison oak. The group of us got back to the car, and luckily we had water. So what you do is you wash off with cold water and soap. You don't want to use warm water or hot water because that opens up your skin and allows the oils to penetrate. And I made my friend strip down, and I stripped down in the car because I didn't want any of those oils on my car seats. I don't know if I'm just OCD or what, but I just was like, no, I don't want this. And yeah, we drove home wearing towels. And then we took all those clothes, threw them in wash machine and washed them twice to ensure that we got rid of all the oils. And I was just a little obsessed that I actually washed my hiking boots too at the car wash, because I was like, I don't want these oils anywhere. I think that's going a little overboard, and you don't really need to do that. But, you know, I was new to poison oak, and I was like, no way. And none of us got poison oak. So was it a patch? Wasn't it a patch? Who knows? But that's just what you do if you do get poison oak. Scott, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to give people a couple of other tips for being able to recognize it. First and foremost, poison oak is a deciduous species, which means it's going to lose its leaves during the winter time. So that's actually when poison oak is at its most dangerous. You're looking at a picture of it now, so you've got a good sense of what it looks like. It does look a little bit like an oak tree's leaf, except it's a lot shinier, and it comes in the clusters of 3, of course. But during the wintertime, the leaves actually fall off the trees, and all you see is a stick. It's important to note that the stem of poison oak also has the same oils that'll cause the rash. So in cases like that, when you're not necessarily able to tell one stick from another, it also helps to know where poison oak tends to grow. Poison oak usually grows where there's shade. So if you're hiking in an area where there's a lot of tree cover, say the eastern side of Peñasquitos Canyon, you're far more likely to encounter poison oak. If you're hiking in an open area that gets a lot of sun exposure, it's far less common. So when you're in an area that has a lot of shade, those are times where you want to be more cautious because you're much more likely to run into it in those situations.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, not everybody reacts to poison oak. So, you know, 2 other things. So on our local trails in San Diego, you might not encounter these 2 next, what I call hazards, but they're not really hazards. It's just something you need to be aware of. And those are mountain bikers and horses. A lot of you have said that you've done a lot of hiking outside of San Diego as well. And so I just wanted to share a little bit. The trails are usually open to all, hikers, mountain bikers, horses, and the trail will say when those mountain bikers aren't allowed, or no bikers on the trail, or no horses on the trail. But usually you can see that those other 2 groups might be there. So what I recommend is just be alert. I highly recommend don't wear ear pods or earbuds when you're hiking, because then you can't hear if a horse or a mountain bike is coming up behind you. If you do want to hike with music or listening to a book, maybe just wear one earbud with you. And the thing with mountain bikers is they are to yield to horses as well as to hikers. And then hikers are to yield to horses. Horses yield to no one. And so if you do come across horses, my recommendation is to just stop and wait alongside the trail and then speak to the owner of the horse. And the owner will usually tell you, yes, you can walk by my horse, or they'll say, oh, please keep talking, so that the horse knows that you're a person and they're familiar with it. So those are my recommendations when you do come across mountain bikers or horses. You will, we love the mountain bikers when we're out on the trails because they do a lot of trail maintenance as well. And we just all need to share the trails and just be aware of our surroundings. And I think that most people are just super nice. We just want everybody to get outside and really enjoy the trails and nature. Scott, do you have anything to add about mountain bikers or horses?
Yeah, so Stefanie was sharing the rules. It's not really a rule, it's more the common trail etiquette that people tend to follow. but I just want to make sure everybody's aware that mountain bikers a lot of the time don't always follow the etiquette. The etiquette being that they yield to hikers. A lot of times they're moving pretty quick. So it's, while the etiquette says yield, the mountain bikers yield to the hikers. I've just found that it's far easier for everybody if the hiker is just comfortable with yielding to the mountain biker. Sometimes they're timing themselves, they're working on downhill speed, they race, they do all kinds of stuff that involves speed. And they don't all follow the same etiquette. Some do, some don't. So even though the etiquette says one thing, it may be wise to just get into the habit of yielding to them and, you know, saying hi and being friendly to them, because most of them are very, very nice people.
Totally agree. And then the other thing is the terrain. So if it is a rainy day or you've had a rainy weekend and then you want to go out hiking, just try to pick trails that are hard packed trails. Like Scott's going to talk about Bataquitos Lagoon. That's a great example of a hard packed trail. You want to stay away from trails where water pools on them and you get muddy kind of patches, because those are going to be, one, slippery areas that you might slip and fall, and two, it's not good for the trail itself. And we want to let those trails dry out. The other thing is hiking on trails that have a lot of rocks. So just be aware, it's better to step on the ground versus stepping on a rock, because a rock might be loose, or, you know, you have the chance of kind of twisting your ankle because maybe you misstepped and you didn't really notice how the rock was. So I just kind of recommend that you step on the ground in between rocks wherever possible. Sometimes I use rocks when I'm going down a really steep hill as an anchor, but I have to be aware that that rock might just slip out, and be ready for that too. And then, you know, another common hazard is elevation. If it's super steep and there's a lot of scree, it might be slippery, or if it's super steep and you're going downhill, you might want to consider using hiking poles to help you stabilize going down. Scott, did you have anything to add about terrain as being a hazard?
Yeah, whenever there's uneven terrain, which, you know, some of the resources that we'll talk about later will indicate what kind of terrain you can expect. So when you're preparing, you know what the condition of the trail is going to be. But one of the things I've always found helpful, even if it's a flat trail, is having a set of hiking poles. So think about it, if you're climbing up the stairs, you know, that'll help you. Like when you're going up a hill, it's almost like you're climbing up the stairs, but you're using the trekking pole to help push you up. Even when you're walking on flat ground, or you're trying to step on a rock that it's the only place where you can put your foot, or you're trying to cross a creek, using the trekking poles can help increase your balance, which makes you less likely to fall down if you're hiking in difficult terrain.
All right, so let's talk about what makes a hike easier and harder. So Scott, he was working on the Foot in the Field in San Diego book. And so he spent a lot of time classifying what makes a hike harder or easier. And Scott, do you want to share with us about what you looked at when you were trying to classify the hikes?
Sure. Yeah, it's a tricky process. So one thing to be aware when you're looking at a resource, whether it's a book or a website or an application, is that most people classify difficulty according to the mythical average hiker. This person doesn't really exist. It's a person who's got a little bit of experience, a little bit of fitness, a little bit of determination. And so we try to find what we think is the average. Think of a bell curve where most people are in the middle. And we base the ratings off of that. So I like to emphasize that point, because I've gotten a lot of feedback over the years, like, hey, you said this was easy. This was not easy. Or, hey, you said this was really hard and I finished it in 2 hours. So what that means is that it's really helpful for you to know your limits. What I often encourage people to do is to try something very easy. If you try the easy hike, whether it's like a 2-mile hike that's relatively flat and you feel like that was hard, you know, adjust your expectations for what easy, moderate, difficult, what all that means. Because it is a tricky thing, because sometimes people are in a different fitness state or a different experience state than other people. But when we talk about easiness or we talk about difficulty, we're factoring a number of different things. We're factoring, what is the terrain like? Is it a nice, smooth, flat, easy trail? Or is it a steep, rugged cross-country trail, or not a trail at all, just off-trail hiking in Anza Borrego? Length oftentimes determines whether our hike is easy or hard. A 2-mile hike is pretty easy for most people. A 15 to 20-mile hike is going to be pretty hard for most people. Elevation gain tends to factor into whether a hike is easy or hard also, because if you're walking on a flat trail, you can expect that it's going to be pretty easy walking. If you're doing El Cajon Mountain, which is famous for being uphill both ways, and there's some really steep grades, and you end up gaining about 4,000 feet of elevation, that's going to make the 11-mile hike that much harder. And of course, weather conditions can impact whether something's going to be easy or difficult. If it's a hot day, the hike is going to be a lot more taxing. If it's a cold day, you may find that your body's working harder to keep you warm. So weather factors are going to play into it. And of course, your physical conditioning, that actually might be one of the most important considerations to keep in mind. As I already mentioned, we base hiking ratings and difficulty ratings off of who we assume to be an average hiker. That's basically someone who's capable of hiking 2 miles per hour, sustaining that over a couple of hours worth of time, and then not really struggling with the effort involved with that. If your physical conditioning isn't at that level, being aware of that, being honest with yourself about what your conditioning is a crucial part in terms of determining what hike you want to take. And then of course, the weight of your backpack, that not just your backpack, but the things that you include in it will change the difficulty of a hike. People in this group that are joining our call who have ever backpacked will know what I'm talking about. So if you're in the mountains and you're taking an overnight camping trip and you've got 40 to 45 pounds worth of weight on your back, every step you take is going to be, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's going to be a lot harder than just an unencumbered step. So if you've got a backpack that's got about 20 pounds worth of stuff, you can expect the hike to feel a little bit more difficult. Did you want to add anything to that, Stefanie?
That's great. I love that overview that you gave. And it's so true. I mean, like I recently had an injury, and sure, in the past I could do 10 miles, no problem. El Cajon, yeah, let's go. Now I'm like, okay, let's just do a mile on the local trail. Okay, why am I tired already? Yeah, because I have an injury and I'm coming back from that injury. So I'm starting back at the bottom, right? I'm looking for all these easy, flat trails that I can go on. And it's just, you know, a different time in your life. And once you start getting back out and you start hiking, whether you're a beginner or, you know, you have suffered an injury, I encourage just to start slowly building up that stamina and then getting back out on the trail. There's nothing better than getting outside into nature and just enjoying the sounds of the birds, taking in the views, and just getting away from the computer. That's just what I wanted to add there. Yeah. So we talked about like getting out and hiking, but where can you find trails to go hike? And one of the things that I found is in San Diego, we are so lucky. We have so many city and county parks. And at these parks, many of them have visitor centers. And the visitor centers will lead tours, or I shouldn't call them tours. I should call them guided hikes, right? You have volunteers that will lead guided hikes. And these are great because you get to meet some other people. There'll be a person there that's really familiar with the trail. They'll point out some really unique features on the trail, and it makes for a fun time. So I know that at Bataquitos, for example, there is a visitor center, and I saw people meeting up for a guided hike there. You can also look at, just go into Google Maps and type in hikes near me, and you'll see a number of hikes. So whether you're in San Diego or you're in Washington or you're in like Toronto in Canada, you can just type this in Google Maps and you'll see a list of different places. And then sometimes there'll be websites, and then you can go to the park's website or the hiking trails website and learn more about the hikes there. Another thing is books. So as Scott mentioned, A Foot in the Field in San Diego, this is a great resource. There are so many great trails in here. There's photos, there's a chart that tells you, the level of difficulty, if you can bring your dog, if you need a permit, what the elevation gain loss is, the best times of years to go. So this book is great. And, you may have seen this one. It's the older version, and this is the 5th. So there's a lot of these floating out there. You might find them at your local library, or it's available, through Amazon, lots of places. There's also the Coast to Crest Trail, Coast to Crest book from the Canyoneers. It's got a lot of good information in it as well about local trails. And I think somebody mentioned a book earlier about 60 hikes within 60 miles of San Diego. So there's another option. There's also apps on your phone. One is called All Trails, and another one is Gaia GPS. And I'll drop these links in the chat for everyone as well. The only thing I caution with regards to using these crowdsourced apps is that these are just regular people who are going out hiking, and they're sharing maybe their trek that they've done and giving feedback. So what I always recommend is, if you do use these apps to find hikes, it's a great tool to find hikes, but go look at other resources. Look at a paper map, look at the county, if they've got anything listed about the hike, because you don't want to just follow some random person's tracks. And like I said, anybody can load their tracks up. Personally, I don't load my hikes up to these crowdsourced platforms, because sometimes I go off trail and I don't want some random person just following what I did, because I might need a much different level of conditioning than they'll be at. Or I was going to look for something, and I realized, like, one time I thought I could cross this area and I couldn't. I climbed up and I was like, oops, this was a really bad idea. And I came back down and turned around. I don't want anybody following that. So I tend not to load my hikes up. I'm going to answer this question, Glenn, in a second that you asked. Another item is websites. So there's a website called Modern Hiker, and fantastic. You can see so many different hikes there, photos, write-ups, kind of giving you an overview of the hike. The Sierra Club here in San Diego, during COVID, unfortunately, we're not running any of our hikes, but we have a hiking program called Wednesday in the Mountains for those of you who are looking for something a little bit more challenging. And we also have just regular hikes that are led by certified leaders. So all of our leaders have to go through a training program to ensure that they are keeping you safe. And then there's the Canyoneers from the Natural History Museum. I hope I picked the right museum. And that's fantastic. If you ever get a chance to go on a hike with the Canyoneers, I'm going to tell you, if you see Pauline Jimenez's name or Brian Swanson, these are great people to go on a hike with. They know so much about the history of our area, the flora, the fauna, the owls. If you see their names on hikes, I highly recommend going with them. And I'll drop these links in. Someone asked about Usgs Maps. You can get those through their website. Also, CalTopo has a website that you can download maps. Gaia allows you to download maps as well. And you asked about Adventure 16. Yes, Adventure 16 closed their doors in February of last year. I don't know if REI still, I know, it's a bummer, but hopefully another moment. There's Nomad Ventures in Escondido. Gaia is spelled G-A-I-A and then GPS. And there is a Nomad Ventures in Escondido as well. And they're a local hiking store if you would like to support a local mom and pop shop when it comes to hiking and camping gear and things like that. Yeah, Scott, did I miss something, or do you have anything that you think you want to add there?
Yeah, I wanted to add two things. There's another book that I included in the chat. I may have gotten the title wrong. I can't remember if it's Best Short Hikes or just Best Hikes, but it's a smaller scale hiking guide that includes hikes that are within the urban center of San Diego. It was actually the last book that Jerry Schad published. He actually worked on it during the last year of his life. And then recently, my friend, and he was actually Jerry's friend too, his name is Don Endicott, revised that book. So if you're looking for something that's, you don't want like a big heavy book that's like, well, I'm never going to hike this 20-mile hike in Anza Borrego Desert, but you want something that's a little more geared towards easy local hikes, that's a great option. And for folks that are interested in topographic maps, I just want to like speak about CalTopo for a moment. The image that you're actually looking at here, I pulled directly from CalTopo. It has every USGS topographic map covering every part of the United States. So basically every inch of the United States has topographic maps in a bunch of different formats. You can customize them, you can create the size that you want, and you can print it out as a paper map. I don't know about you, but I don't love spending a lot of time looking at my phone when I'm hiking. I actually still like to use a paper map. But it's one of the best free resources for hiking information. If you're doing a casual hike at a lagoon or Torrey Pines, you may not need something like this, but if you're looking for something a little bit more involved, it's a great resource both for planning and for having maps on the trail with you.
And Scott, that's caltopo.com. Is that correct? You're muted.
Yes,
right.
that is caltopo.com. Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. So I'm going to move this along a little bit. And what do you need to start hiking? Basically, comfortable shoes with a good sole, comfortable clothing. Highly recommend a hat, sunglasses, a day pack to put all your stuff in, a snack, water. A map is great when you're going to places that you've never been before, but really knowing where you're going, I highly recommend that. And so knowing the trail in the area and knowing where you can exit if something does go wrong, and then an emergency contact. And what I mean by that is just letting somebody know, hey, you know what, I'm gonna go out for this hike. I'm going to Torrey Pines. It's gonna take me about an hour. I'll just check in with you when I get back. I know some people, they live alone and they think, I don't need to go tell somebody where I'm going hiking. But if something does happen to you, at least people know, like, oh, she hasn't been home for a day. I wonder where she is, or where is she gone? They can say, well, she said she was going hiking at Torrey Pines. Let's go check out that area and see if her car's there. So that's just something that I kind of always do. And I recommend that people do let people know where they're going hiking if they plan to hike and when they're going to come back. Scott, did you have anything to add to that?
No, that's great advice.
Cool. And then some of you may have heard about the 10 essentials. And for those of you who are avid hikers, when you're going out on the trails, maybe not your local trail, like that's an hour or two from your, an hour, like you're going on an hour hike and it's local to you, you might not take all of this stuff. You might just take your map, your sun protection, nutrition, hydration, a cell phone, just so that you can communicate with the outside world. But if you're out in rural areas, like you're out in Anza Borrego, these 10 essentials, we recommend you take them because this is what you might need to survive a night out in the wilderness. So we always recommend taking some extra clothing because the clothing you might be wearing might be all wet from sweating and then your body cools down. So you might want to switch off that clothing or add some warm clothing. To take a headlamp with you. Don't rely on your cell phone to be your light source, so because you don't want to waste your cell phone, and also it isn't the best for that if you do run out of cell power or power on your phone. First aid supplies in case something does happen. Fire starting materials in San Diego, in California, we're in the fire restrictions, so we don't recommend you start a fire, but I mean, if it's a life or death situation and that's the only way you're going to stay warm, just be smart about starting a fire. And then a repair kit and tools, including a knife. I don't know how many times duct tape has saved the day where somebody's shoe, the sole comes off and then you duct tape the shoe up, or a hiking pole breaks, snaps in half and you're like, what am I gonna do? Or something like that. And then take some rain gear or some type of emergency shelter. I know we go rain gear. What do I need rain gear for in San Diego? But it does provide that layer of insulation. And also it can provide with shelter like a rain poncho or something like that. Space blankets are great as well. And if you don't have it, a whistle, bringing a whistle is good because a whistle can be heard really far away if there's an emergency and you need to let people know where you are. Sorry that I went through that really quickly, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time on the 10 essentials. Scott, did I miss anything?
No, I just wanted to add that a lot of backpacks that are made nowadays, they actually have a whistle built into them. So if you're buying a pack, check for the ones that actually have the whistle built in.
Great point. Yeah, I have that on almost all my packs, except for my super ultralight hydration pack that I take stand-up paddleboarding. So I have an extra whistle I bring with me. All right. Well, I think like now the time that everybody's been waiting for is 5 great hikes to get started. And Scott, I'm really excited to hear more about these hikes that you love so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we were thinking about what hikes we would want to share with folks, and we picked a nice mixture of accessible local hikes that are fairly easy for just about everybody. Some of them have a few challenges, some of them are a little bit more strenuous, and then we couldn't resist throwing in a favorite that's a little further afield for people who are interested in having an adventure. So I'm going to go through each one step by step and talk a little bit about what's on the trail, what you're going to see, what makes that particular trail special. Picked out a couple of ones that are a little less known and a couple of ones that are pretty famous. So we start with the Bataquitos Lagoon, which is in Carlsbad in the Aviara area of Carlsbad, right off of Poinsettia. And this is one of the best beginners hikes that I can think of. If I'm talking to someone who's never hiked before, they want to have an easy experience. They don't want to be pressed too hard. They don't want to deal with a lot of heat. They don't want a steep hill to climb. They just want a nice, easy walk with some pleasant scenery. This is the place to start. The lagoon features trails up to about 3.9 to 4 miles. There are 4 different access points, one on the west end of the lagoon, and then 3 more scattered around the different access points along Bataquitos Drive going eastbound towards El Camino Real. The trail is mostly flat. There are a couple of small hills. It is a very, very, very dog-friendly hike. Anytime you hike there, you're bound to see at least a dozen people walking their dogs, usually more, especially if you're there on the weekend. So if you've got a pup with you and you want to bring your pup along, this is a great one. The temperature here is almost always comfortable. Sometimes in the late fall or the late summer and the early fall, we'll get some heat waves that make the coastal temperatures pretty hot. But aside from those times, especially in the mornings, you can count on really comfortable, cool temperatures thanks to the moderating influence of the Pacific Ocean. And some of the things that you're going to find here is gentle topography. Like I said, it is a flat trail. There are only a couple of places where there are a couple of little hills that you have to go over, and even those are pretty inconsequential. I think the maximum elevation I've ever gained while hiking here is about 50 feet. And that makes it easy for everybody. This is a fantastic place for bird watching. So if you enjoy birds, you've got a good pair of binoculars, or even if you are a serious photographer with one of those 5-foot lenses, the lagoon hosts a pretty diverse population of birds. I've seen everything from ospreys, hawks, pelicans, seagulls, egrets, herons, a bunch of songbirds. And part of the reason why it supports so much bird life, and I should say this is true for all of our coastal lagoons, is that San Diego County lies on what's called the Pacific Flyway, which is a migratory route for birds traveling from the north to the south. So birds traveling from Canada, the Pacific Northwest, going down to Mexico for the winter, doing it classic snowbird style. They will stop here at periods during the spring and during the fall en route back and forth. And the wetlands and the lagoons in San Diego County attract birds because there's an influx of freshwater and tidal water, which creates some interesting nutrient-rich habitats. There's often a lot of fish. I've seen a lot of fish jumping in the lagoon, and the birds will hunt for the fish. So it's a pretty good food source for the local birds. There's a lot of tree cover, so there's a lot of nesting birds, nesting raptors, nesting egrets. And if you come looking for birds, this is a great place to start. I mentioned the intertidal nature of this. So what often happens here is the high tide will fill up the lagoon and it'll be full to bursting, just like you see here in this picture. And the low tide will drain the lagoon, not 100%, but most of the way. And when the low tide happens, that exposes a lot of the microorganisms, a lot of shellfish, a lot of things like that, that the birds will want to eat. So varying tides will produce different experiences as far as bird watching or animal watching. I've seen all kinds of animals here. I've seen snakes, I've seen skunks, I've seen raccoons, I've seen a lot of different things. Obviously dogs, but those are domesticated. And the intertidal lagoons are a nice coastal feature. There are five different lagoons on the coastal area that have, I might be getting that number wrong, I have to think it through. So we got the Buena Vista Lagoon that's got a trail, Bataquitos that has a trail, San Alejo Lagoon that's got a trail, the San Dieguito Lagoon that's got a trail, and then I guess you can count the Tijuana River Valley, although that's a completely separate entity. So the thing about the intertidal lagoons is that we have a chance to walk along the water. We know there aren't a lot of lakes here in San Diego County, so it's got a lot of good water features. And one of the other things that makes Bataquitos such a nice place for beginners is that there are a lot of features here geared towards visitors. The visitor center has some interpretive displays. It's got a flush toilet, which can be very, very handy in a pinch. It has the QR codes that allow you to take a self-guided tour. The self-guided tour provides information about the habitats, about the different natural features, some of the historical features that you might find. And then, of course, there are regularly spaced benches, I'd say every 1/10 of a mile to 2/10 of a mile, that have shade structures that allow people to stop, rest, take a break, and enjoy the scenery. So this is an ideal starting point hike for people who don't have a lot of experience. But even really experienced hikers like myself, I've done a ton of hiking. I still hike this trail nearly once a week because it's become such a pleasant experience for me. It's easy to access, it's convenient. I usually drop my kid off at school, come here, hike, go to work. So it's a personal favorite of mine. Now, I'm assuming that everybody here, based off of what was shared with us during the introductions, I'm assuming everybody here is familiar with Torrey Pines Reserve. Now, one of the areas that people are a lot less familiar with is the reserve extension. So for those of you who are not familiar with the reserve extension, the primary area of the Torrey Pines is on the south end of the Peñasquitos Lagoon. Oh, that's the one I forgot, the Peñasquitos Lagoon. That also has a hiking trail. On the south side of the Peñasquitos Lagoon is the main reserve. A very popular place. Most people who hike in San Diego have been there at least once. However, it can be really tough to find a parking spot. It can be very crowded, especially if you go in the middle of the day. And so for people who want to experience the Torrey Pines, want to have some nice ocean views, I highly recommend the extension, which is on the north side of the Peñasquitos Lagoon. It was set aside in the late 60s, early 70s when it was becoming clear that they were going to develop that area in the Del Mar Heights area. And they set this pocket of open space aside just to protect the Torrey Pines. You can get about up to 3 miles, but you have to do some pretty extensive wandering around there. There is some moderate uphill climbing, so you will want to be prepared to do a little bit of uphill work. People should be aware that there are no dogs allowed. It is a state reserve, and California state parks are typically not very dog friendly. There are only a few places I can think of in the state parks that do allow dogs. But like the Bataquitos Lagoon, it's pretty comfortable year round, probably nicest during the springtime and the late winter time. But even in summertime, if you get out there in the morning, you should have a pretty comfortable experience. It's a great place for wildflowers, which typically bloom between February all the way up to June. March and April tend to be the best times. So everything in that habitat tends to bloom except for the Torrey Pines, of course. There's some interesting geology there. The Torrey Pines Bluff is built off of 2 separate layers of sandstone. There's the cream-colored Torrey sandstone and the red-colored Linda Vista sandstone, which produces some formations that are reminiscent of Bryce Canyon National Park, thanks to the rust red coloration and the interesting erosion patterns. And then of course you've got the Torrey Pine, which is one of the rarest trees on the planet, with only about 27 to 2,800 species still growing in the wild here in San Diego County. And there's some pretty great ocean views. They're not as up close and personal as what you get from the reserve, but you do get a pretty impressive view, especially from some of the viewpoints that are on the western side of the Extension Reserve. And of course, there are a lot of critters. You're looking at here is a San Diego alligator lizard. They do bite, so don't pick them up. They will latch on and kind of dangle around, so don't pick them up. They do have rattlesnakes. They do have a ton of butterflies, especially during the spring, and they do have a lot of small animals like rabbits and rodents and things like that. So it's not like a safari type experience, but there is a decent amount of wildlife. Now, San Diego County does not have any national parks, but we do have one national monument, which is at Cabrillo National Monument at the very southern tip of Point Loma. It marks the spot where Cabrillo, one of the first Spanish explorers to set foot on California, actually set foot on California. And it also has a pretty rich history. It's about a 3-mile trail, and that includes a short trip over to the lighthouse. The hardest part of this hike is that it's downhill at the beginning and then uphill at the end, which can be a little bit difficult. You're not actually gaining more elevation than you would otherwise, but there's something psychological that goes on when you're climbing out at the end of a hike versus climbing up in the middle of it. It's close to the coast, so again, it's pretty comfortable year round. It's also not dog friendly, and there is an entrance fee required. They just changed it recently, so I think it's $15 now, but they do have interagency passes available that you can buy that will give you access throughout the year. I know the National Parks has one that you pay $80 and you get unlimited. If you're a senior citizen, I do believe that they have an even cheaper version that is a lifetime pass. And, you know, of course, Cabrillo's got the local history. I mentioned Cabrillo himself, but this was also a station for, you know, air defense and Navy defense during World War II, and you can still see a lot of those features on the hike itself. And of course, it's got the Point Loma Lighthouse, which is also a historic structure, so history buffs have a lot to enjoy here. There's some beautiful coastal habitats that support wildflowers all the way from January into June. This flower that you're looking at is called lance leaf dudleya, and it tends to flower during the late spring. So if you go during the spring and late winter, you're pretty likely to have a pretty good floral display with different flowers and different specimens. And then of course, one of the greatest things about Point Loma is that you've got some wonderful ocean and city views. This is not the greatest city view picture just because it was a pretty heavy marine layer day, but when it's clear, you can see all of downtown San Diego, all the way east towards the Cuyamaca Mountains, which is a good 50 to 60 miles away. Now, here's another hike that locals from La Jolla may be pretty familiar with. There is, this in A Foot in a Field is written up as a one-way hike starting from La Jolla shores and going all the way to Torrey Pine State Beach. If you hike it that way, it is a 5.5-mile one-way trip. It does require that you have 2 cars on either end, although nowadays you can take an Uber or a Lyft back to La Jolla. That's become the way I like to do it nowadays. If you do it out and back, it is 11 miles. There's no elevation gain because you're basically at sea level the entire time. And of course, the terrain is pretty easy, although if you're walking in the deep sand, that can slow you down a little bit. If you're thinking about doing this one, it is important to note that it requires hiking at a low tide. The reason for that is just north of the Scripps Pier, there is a reef, and crossing the reef during a high tide is next to impossible because the tide goes all the way up to the base of the cliffs there. So you're not going to get too far during a high tide. There are other ways to get to this beach, especially the beach in the middle, which is Black's Beach. There are other ways to get there, but it does require some climbing down from the glider port and then back up. So the optimal time to take this hike is during a low tide. The best low tides tend to be during the winter time. And the access tends to be easier from the La Jolla Shores side. The parking is more reliably available as opposed to on the Torrey Pine side where everybody's going there. So you're gonna have a harder time finding the parking. The thing that makes this hike so great is that you have miles of pristine beach. You know that there's still development up on top of the bluffs, but there are long stretches where you don't see any development. It gives you the feeling that you're walking through the same California that, you know, existed before everything got developed along the coast. You do have a pretty good chance of seeing sea life, especially at low tides. There are a couple of tide pools that will open up, and then a bunch of different animals will crawl out. I've seen crabs, I've seen all kinds of shellfish, I've seen all kinds of birds, and I've seen sea lions along the beach there, and multiple hikes. And then of course you have the cliffs up along the shore. Some of those cliffs exceed 300 to 400 feet, especially on the Torrey Pine side of everything. And there's a lot of beautiful erosion. Come during the middle of the day and you're likely to see people gliding off of the glider port. So it's a wonderful place, especially on the coast, to get a real sense of what makes coastal San Diego so great. Miles of beaches that you can enjoy, especially if you get into the middle of the hike where the Black's Beach area is. You have a pretty solid chance of getting some solitude there. And then our final hike, like I said, we couldn't resist including something out in the backcountry, simply because there's so much diversity out there that we would, I don't know, I just want to share some of our favorite hikes out in the eastern side of the county. Stonewall Peak in Cuyamaca Rancho State Park is one of the easiest and most accessible mountain experiences you can have in San Diego County. It's 3.8 miles, so it's going to be a little bit on the longer side. And there is a moderate amount of elevation gain. I believe it tops out at about 700 feet. So you do need to have a little bit of physical fitness and a little bit of stamina, but it's also not like El Cajon Mountain where you're going to be, you know, practically killing yourself trying to get up that hill and back down. It does start at a moderate altitude, around 5,000 feet. Most people don't experience the effects of altitude sickness at that middle elevation, although you never know. So if you have any issues or any concerns with breathing or with altitude, might not be the hike for you, or, you know, maybe you spend a little bit of time just getting used to the altitude before you start and take it really slow. There is a little bit of challenging terrain. It is one of those hikes where there are some rocks and there are a couple of downed trees, just because the cedar fire in 2003 did burn through the area and trees do occasionally fall. It is a state park, so it's not dog friendly. And there is an entry fee at the Paso Picacho day use area, and it's a $10 fee, at least right now. They may change the price, but right now it's a $10 fee. So because of where Stonewall Peak is located, it's in the heart of Cuyamaca, you have some pretty impressive views from the top. You, just so you know, the peak that's directly in the center, that is North Peak, which sits between Cuyamaca and Julian. To the left of North Peak, you see the Palomar Mountains. To the right of North Peak, you can see Mount San Jacinto all the way in Riverside County. And then of course, if you were actually there and you were to turn right, you would see most of Anza Borrego Desert. So this is a great place to get a look at the San Diego backcountry with views that extend up to 60, 70, even 80 miles sometimes when the atmosphere is clear. There's a lot of critters in San Diego, or in Cuyamaca Rancho State Park. In fact, it's one of the most reliable places to see animals. Just about every time I go there, I see deer, I see turkeys, I see coyotes sometimes. I've even seen mountain lions in this area. Don't worry, very unlikely to see them unless you're hiking early in the morning, which is something I tend to do. But I saw one mountain lion while driving through this area. So if you do like wildlife, coming around 8, 9, 10 in the morning, you're more likely to see animals than you are if you were to come, you know, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because most animals are taking a siesta around that time. And then, of course, it is much more of a mountain experience than what you would experience on the coast. This is the trail up to the summit, which always makes me think of the Sierra Nevada just because it's carved into the granite. You do want to be careful if it's snowing because it can get pretty slippery. But there's nothing quite like climbing up to the top of a peak, standing on top of it, looking around, seeing pine forest, seeing sweeping views. So I had to share this one with you guys because it is such a fun experience for people who are interested in getting out and about and seeing something a little further afield. So, Stefanie, if you'd like to jump in.
Yeah, so if you want to connect with either Scott or I, if you have more questions, you can connect with Scott at scottturnerhikes.net. and on social media at Scott Turner Hikes. And myself, I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Stefanie.Maio. And then on LinkedIn and Twitter, just Stefanie Maio. And then if you'd like to, you can also connect with me through the Sierra Club San Diego. That number is 858-569-6005. And yeah, should we open it up? Did you have anything else to add, Scott? Did I miss anything?
No, I think we've covered everything. I think this would be a great time to answer some questions. A question in the chat from Becky that was asking about apps that show where you are on the trail. Both Gaia GPS and All Trails, I'll actually type them in really quick. They do show your location. Whoops, sorry, it's trying to send it to, oh, there we go. They do show your location, and it does superimpose your location onto a map. So it can be a handy navigation device. Just a word of warning though, sometimes for whatever reason, those apps can fail on people. I've had it happen to me myself in a really dangerous situation. So I've actually learned to rely on paper maps. It's no problem if you're in a comfortable area that's close to the coast with good cell reception. But if you're going out into the wilderness, it's probably best to keep a paper map on you.
Yeah, for those of you who have not hiked the La Jolla Open Space Trail, I'd encourage you to do it for your pleasure, the views, and also because the city of San Diego is planning to put a very large reservoir up at the top of it. And so the more people we get who appreciate having the open space, we're in the comment phase and trying to get the reservoir put someplace else or limited in scope at least. But it starts at Albar Drive, just off of Soledad Road, and it hikes up through beautiful coastal sage scrub. There's a lot of coast beryl cactus up there. There's coastal manzanita on the hillside, and it goes all the way to the top at Brodea Drive, and you can also hike down from Brodea. And there's a couple of loops in there, but the views are spectacular of Torrey Pines and North County.
Thanks, Glenn. I'll have to check that out.
There was a question in the chat with regards to trails for biking. And so I just wanted to comment, and Strava and Trailforks, those are great apps to use as well. But like the other apps we mentioned, always use them with some caution and do a little bit more research. Don't just trust everything that the app has to say. That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah. And the only thing I wanted to add was just I'm very, very grateful that everybody took the time to spend with us today. It was a pleasure talking with everybody, and I'm really glad to share what we know and some of our experience with hiking and inspiring people to get out there. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for being here.
I echo that.
Again, for more information about upcoming virtual and in-person events, please visit our website. It's ljcommunitycenter.org. Hope to see you all soon. In the meantime, stay well, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.